My dad lost his hair in his early 20s, so this has always been a concern of mine. And when I was in my 30s, there were periods where I thought that my hair was thinning a little bit. And so I've implemented a lot of things over the years that have been very helpful, and I want to share them in this video today. So this is all about how to prevent and reverse hair loss. And number one would be nutrition. And we see this in people that go on weight loss regimens and have a rapid weight loss where they don't really watch what they're eating, especially with these GLP-1 agonists right now, people cutting out protein, for example. Now, protein is very crucial, and if you cut out protein too much, you can certainly trigger hair loss. So it's very important that you get adequate protein intake of good sources, and it should be around 0.8 gram per pound of ideal body weight. Again, unless you have any medical condition that prevents you from eating higher amounts of protein, this is what I would suggest, even if you're on a weight loss regimen. It is a big mistake to cut out protein when you're losing weight, because this causes, besides hair loss, other deficiencies like muscle loss. And it's something that's very concerning. I see this all the time in my clinic. People approach this wrong. They cut down their protein. I usually increase their protein, but I decrease their carbs and their fats, and they are very happy afterwards. They feel more satiated, and their weight loss success is still there, even though they have adequate protein intake. So don't neglect that. Number one, protein intake. Number two would be vitamins and minerals. And we're talking here about B vitamins, specifically biotin. Biotin is very important here for hair loss. Make sure you get adequate amounts of that coming in. Vitamin D is another one that many people are deficient in. When I do a blood test, the majority of people will have a vitamin D level that's very low. And that is, of course, concerning for the immune system, but also for your hair. So vitamin D, very important for hair as well. Selenium is a mineral that is very helpful here as well. And, you should have adequate intake of that. Now, with all of those, don't overdose, go with the regular suggested doses, but make sure you're not deficient in them is my point here, right? As with any supplement or medication, of course, if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, or have any other medical conditions, then talk to your provider first before you start on any of those, of course. There are two other supplements that I would only recommend for men. Now, women, of course, can take herbal supplements like this. However, these can block 5-alpha reductase. That is an enzyme that prevents the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. In pregnant women or growing children, these can be detrimental because they can cause some hormonal changes, which are not very good. So again, this should only be for men, and that would be saw palmetto and Pygeum. Now, both saw palmetto and Pygeum are herbal supplements that can block 5-alpha reductase. And that is a milder form of something you may know under the name Propecia or Finasteride. Now, Propecia or Finasteride, I'm going to talk that in a second, is, of course, a prescription medication that blocks 5-alpha reductase, only for men. Again, women should not take this, especially pregnant women or children. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. But a milder form of this, if you don't want to go to a prescription yet, you can use as a man saw palmetto and Pygeum. A lot of times they come together in one formula. And again, what they do is they block this enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. And because of that, less testosterone is converted to DHT or dihydrotestosterone. And DHT is thought to accumulate at the hair follicle and causes it to shrink. And over time causes hair loss. When you think there's these three phases that you have in your hair follicle, right? There's a growth phase, a stagnation phase, and then a phase where the hair will fall out, and then it repeats. But these phases can be shortened to the extent where the hair becomes thinner and more brittle and the hair follicle shrinks down if DHT accumulates. There is a genetic component to this, and if we block DHT, and this can be blocked in the scalp up to 60% with medication, and to a lesser percentage with the saw palmetto and Pygeum. But then you can certainly help the hair follicle not shrink down and make it a bit more healthy. So this is something that I would generally recommend. It's also good for the prostate, of course, as finasteride, which is also given in large amounts for BPH or benign prostatic hypertrophy, is a medication that decreases, as it does decrease DHT, it can also help to decrease prostatic hypertrophy. So if you don't want to go on a prescription medication yet, then saw palmetto plus Pygeum may be a good option for you. It's important for the saw palmetto to be 60 to 80% sterols, and you'll see that usually written there by the manufacturers on the bottle. And since I brought it up already, one step further from a supplement like saw palmetto Pygeum would be Propecia or finasteride at 1 milligram. Now, finasteride also can be prescribed in 5 milligrams. Again, that's really more specific to BPH or benign prostatic hypertrophy. At 1 milligram, it is sufficient to block enough of this 5-alpha reductase to decrease DHT levels up to 60% in the scalp. and thereby helps with a healthier hair follicle. So it prevents the shrinkage of the hair follicle and therefore makes your hair more healthy. Keep in mind, as a man, if you are on this, again, do not let women, especially pregnant women or children, touch the tablets. Many of them now are safety coated so that because this stuff gets absorbed through your skin, and it can be detrimental in pregnancy and can also be detrimental for a developing child. So you should be very careful with that. If you're taking a finasteride 5 milligrams, some people cut this into pieces. There's a lot of dust. I would not recommend it for that purpose because, again, this will be on your skin. This will be everywhere. It's cleaner to take a 1 milligram tablet that's enterically coated. And that's what these new tablets are usually, that's what they usually do to these tablets. So keep in mind also while you're on this that you should not donate blood. And the reason for that is that if you donate blood while you're on it, the blood could be received by a pregnant woman or a child. And therefore, you need to tell them if you do a blood donation that you're on this medication, on Propecia or Finasteride in general, right? So there are a few restrictions if you are taking Propecia or Finasteride. I'm not currently on this, but I would consider this, for example, if I was on TRT or testosterone replacement therapy, because then, again, you would have higher levels of testosterone again. And because of that, some of it is converted by 5-alpha reductase to DHT. There will be higher DHT levels. Now, DHT itself is not a problematic molecule, but it is problematic for your hair follicle. So, and for the prostate as well. So if you are on TRT, it might be a good idea to be on Propecia or the generic finasteride 1 milligram enterically coated at the same time to prevent hair loss in general. Now, another medication that can be taken by both men and women is Minoxidil. And Minoxidil is a medication that was originally developed for high blood pressure. It is topically applied, and they applied this to the scalp. And I think they had a lot of the study subjects that were men that were bald, and they had high blood pressure. And you spray it on the skin of the scalp. And the idea here is what it is. It's a vasodilator. So it locally causes little small blood vessels to get bigger. And therefore, if you think of your body as a closed system where there's pressure building up, if you can divert some of that pressure into these blood vessels now that are filling up in your scalp, then you have a lower central blood pressure. It didn't work very well for blood pressure, but they noticed that these study participants started to have more hair growth, that their hair started to grow again. And so they, studied this and they figured, hey, this is great because we're allowing more oxygen to get to the hair follicle again. We're allowing more nutrients to get there. The hair follicle becomes healthier, stronger again, and the hair is growing again. And that's how this works. The downside of these things is, of course, if you stop the minoxidil, the hair will fall out again. It's a very short-term reward. This is available for both men and women. I believe it's in different concentrations, and always, of course, ask your physician first before starting this. Here again, if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, do not use any of these. It is not hormonally as dangerous, but of course it is a medication, and during pregnancy, breastfeeding, you should not take anything like this. I think another option is if you don't want to go there. I don't take minoxidil, but one thing I do, which is a similar effect, I do scalp massages, and I do this every day, where you actually put your head in a down position, right, to the ground. You take a towel and you actually massage your head for about a good minute or 2 minutes. And then after the massage, you stop for a second. As your head is facing down, there's a lot of blood flow. You experience that. You feel a bit of flushing in your face as well with this. But you do this for 1 to 2 minutes, and it has a similar effect, at least short term, not as long as minoxidil would, of course, of improving blood flow there in these capillary beds in your scalp. So having more blood flow through massage can certainly mimic that, at least for some time. It's not as long lasting, but you transport more oxygen to the hair follicles, you transport more nutrients there. And if you do this regularly, I do this after a shower every day for like one minute at least, right, to stimulate blood flow to the scalp. And I found this to be very effective. Again, it is not as profound as the medication, but it's something that you can do, and it's of course free. Now, another cause of hair loss may not be related to your nutritional status or your vitamins, mineral intake, but it might be that there's buildup of gunk from the products you're using on your hair. And if that's the case, that can certainly contribute to hair loss. So it's good to use a shampoo at least once in a while that really washes away all those deposits that you have on your scalp, to really let the skin breathe again, and that stuff in there. So if you put too much gunk on your head of some kind, and there's a lot of chemicals we put on there, that could be detrimental to your hair, of course. So it's important to make sure that you don't have too much buildup of product there. And there are some clarifying shampoos that are pretty good there that can really help with getting rid of that junk there. So to allow the skin of your scalp to be healthier. So using a mild shampoo that gets rid of all this gunk once in a while is a good idea, in my opinion. Another treatment that's helpful for both men and women is red light. And you've seen these caps probably, they have them on Amazon, emitting red light around 650 nanometers. Now this only penetrates about a half an inch into skin, which is perfect actually, because this is where you find the hair follicle and of course all the capillary beds supplying nutrients there. The red light penetrates deep into cells and it stimulates the mitochondria to increase production of melatonin, makes them healthier. This is an antioxidant, and in general helps with the health of the cell, including, of course, of the cells of your hair follicle and all the cells surrounding it. It can bring in more oxygen, it can bring in more nutrients, and this is actually very helpful for the hair follicle. Now, there are different types of red light. Some caps are more expensive. They call them low-level lasers, but ultimately the wavelength is always the same. The intensity might vary, and of course with the higher intensity you might have better results, but it will cost you more money. So it's always questionable, is one better than the other? Another option is, if you don't want to get a cap or anything like that, to spend more time outside and have some natural sunlight on your head, because 54% of the sun's spectrum is actually near-infrared light, which goes a bit deeper, and then you have also the red light spectrum in there, which is very efficient in going in there and is very helpful for your scalp and helpful for the cells, including your hair follicle and the surrounding cells. So getting more sunlight on your head without burning, of course, be very cautious of that, or using a red light cap can be very, very successful here. I use a red light cap that has both red light and near-infrared light, and the near-infrared light is again penetrating deeper. This goes through bone into the brain. I use this mostly for prevention of dementia or any other neurocognitive disorder. And the red light, that's what you see. This is the visible, very bright red light in there. That is something that's actually very good for the scalp. It's always questionable if these caps have a sufficient intensity. I always think it's better than nothing. It's something that is easy to do. I do this every morning. It's about 15 to 20 minutes. And while you wear that, you can sip your coffee and check your emails. It's nothing that takes time out of your day. So all these are remedies that you can use together. Again, keep in mind, some are only for men, but in general, if you can use several of these together, you optimize your nutritional status, you're using some red light, let's say, and you are using some head massages, improving blood flow, you can certainly improve the health of your hair follicles greatly and can really help to prevent hair loss that's already occurring and also hopefully reverse some of that. So hopefully this was very helpful. Would love to see in the comments what you're using, because I'm actually very interested what other modalities people are using that have been working for them.